Hello, so today we'll be discussing much about the backend implementation of TaskMaster. Right, so we're going to actually start off with the flow. Okay, so the first stage is having our dependencies installed. Right, so you can basically, we just have to call that as server. So first of all, you need to activate your environment. If you don't know how to do that, you can basically go to dot v dot env, then script, then just activate. Right, so you can just go here, you sit into the and just use the activate keyword. So you should be having your environment activated. So if you don't have the requirements installed, so what you can basically do is to run this other command. So pip. So if you already have all those, there seems to be some issues. The file requirements, the TXT. Okay, so I have to basically set it back into the root directory. So I'm in the root. So I'm in the root directory now. So where we basically have the pip file log, right? So you can run similar command here. So this is where you can basically install your dependencies. So you can see that I already have all of the dependencies installed. So we'll just move on to the next stage. All right. So this is the architecture of the program. So basically, what it has the controllers, it has the models, it has the routes, it has the tests, it has the utils, right, and validation, validators for validation, right. So I've actually provided a sample env here that you can use to fill out, right. So the Flask app can be several. Flask env, your environment can be development, which is very important. Database URL, if you have any Postgres setup, right, you can put the URL here. And the secret key, right, so you can just input any form of secret key. It doesn't really matter, just have some keys that are secured. So you basically have to specify your JWT secret key as well. This is your JSON Web Token key. All right, so move on to, we'll actually go through Postman, and then we'll go through all the APIs we basically have, right. So the first API we have is the head check, right. So I will just run the server real quick. So since you're in development mode, I always advise you run Flask run. Then you have to basically reload it. Reload, if I could spell. So reload. So this should be able to run your Flask server. So this is good, right? So you're in development server, right? So you basically have all of this setup. So when you have that, you can start communicating with your APIs, right? So you can click on send here. This is a base. You should be able to have this. I think you can check that out in the browsers as well. So basically, you should have similar response, right? So that means you're doing the right thing. So when you have your setup, we'll go through the APIs one after the other, right? So first of all, let's go to the API to create a user. So creating the user, basically, you have to pass in the full name, the email, and then the password, right? So we have to go through this. First of all, before we go through it, let's see if it works, right? So I'll click on that now. You'll see that I just created a new user, right? So registration completed, kindly log in. So we're not actually verifying anything, we just a basic form of authentication. So yeah, so go through the APIs to create this user, /user/users. So we can go to routes, okay? And then we have user. So this is what we're using to create user. So this is the create user. I think I'll explain this first part. So what we're doing here is that we basically have some sort of API version. So API version is just what we have in our constant, doesn't really matter. It's /API/v1. So that's the more reason when you check your here, check your route, you can see the /API/v1, right? So that's what we have here. And then the resource name, which is user, as what you see here, user, and then the users, which is actual endpoint, right? So / users. So this is just a post request, and see here we have it as a post request as well. So then you can basically call this function. So when you hit this route, it's going to call this. So this definitely returns this, the create user controller. right? So when we open this out, basically have this long code on how we're basically creating the user. All right. So basically, what we're doing is we're actually using a couple of things, right? So the way we're actually running our validations, we're using WTK forms, WT forms to validate our inputs on the backend. So in the React application, it has similar form of validation. We validate both on the front end and the backend for enhanced security, right? So yeah, so basically have this. We have the way our user form is specified. User basically needs to supply the full name and then the email, right? So that's basically it. So and then we have the password form as well. This is where we have to validating the password. So we try to get the password, right? So we can see from here we have the password field. So this is the password we're trying to get in here. So we get that password here, we validate it with this password form. It just takes the password input. It needs to have a minimum of 5 characters and a maximum of 50. Right. So yeah, basically when both of them is validated, we check it with this one. Right. So if there seems to be any issue where one isn't validated, we'll just return this error for them. Right. So we'll go on to filter to check our DB if that user already exists. If it exists, we'll just throw this folder error. So I've created this error response so we don't have to have this input all over and over again. So error response is a way we basically check for errors, right? So we just return some sort of meta object, that has the status code and then the message, right? So we'll go back to controller. So that's what error response does. So then the very next stage is, at this stage we're already aware that the user is not a DB and then all the inputs are valid. So first of all, we hash the user's password in this stage where we hash it right now. So when we hash it, so we basically just create a new user. So we create a new user by passing in the full name and then the email. So this is basically what you need to create a user. So we've separated the user model from the password model just to have a better clarity. So this is we're actually using a SQL database. We basically have to have a kind of architecture that separates this modular unit. So user model should be separated from the password model. Alright, so the very next thing we're going to do is we've created a new user and then we'll just add this new user to the session. Right? So one thing, while we're actually using session here, this is very vital, is that most times when you run apps like this, you basically have to use transactions. Right? So what I mean by that is, what happens if a user is created, but at the end of the day, the password, there was an issue here and the password wasn't created. So at the end of that means that the user will still be in our DB and then that user doesn't have any password. So it becomes really problematic when the user wants to log in, right? So that's the more reason you basically have to use session to tie everything together, and commit it if everything is successful. If not, it will just going to roll back. Right, so that's basically it. Since we're basically doing this with session, we basically have a new user, and then in order for us to get the new user ID, we basically have to flush that session to get the new user ID. So we basically have the new user ID here, so we cannot use our new user ID to create the user's password. So password model only takes in the user ID and then the hashed password. So let's check the password model. It takes in the user ID and then the password. So that is pretty much understandable. Right, so this is the way the password model looks like. User ID, the password, right? So if you want to convert anything to dictionary and just return here and do something like password, save the password, normal Python convention, right? So when you're done there, you basically have to come in here, right? If you want to render this to the user, you can basically just use the asdict keyword to run the user dictionary. So you just return this the user dictionary right here. So that's the more reason when I created a new user, I was saying this as the user dictionary containing the email, the full name, and the ID. So these are actually responses from the user model, the full name, the email, and then the created ID, which we are not seeing at this stage, right? So normally we basically have an init model that we created. This init model basically has an ID where it generates some sort of UUID, right? Created ad and also updated ad. So the UUID we're creating here is that if you notice, the user model is actually extended from the base model. So that means the ID is actually, that's what we are getting the ID from, right? So basically, that's how it works, and we can go back and see that we basically have the sign up successful. So we have a success response that tracks very similar to error response. So just return meta, status code, message, but then it returns the actual data. So we justify this data and then just return both the response and then the status code. Right. So that's how the register endpoint works. Right. So it might be a lot, but it's really very simple when you go through it one after the other. So then we go on to the login controller. So we're going to actually log in. Let's test it first. Postman. So this is our email. So go to the login API. Specify our email right there just to make sure we know what we're doing. Okay, right. So I think we have some sort of password, my chef, whatever, right? So good. So we're able to log in successfully, and what we have in the login is the access token and the user ID. User can basically use access token to, to call other APIs. So yeah, we'll go over to the login user controller, and we'll go after it one by one. So first of all, we're getting the request. We get the JSON data from the request. By JSON data, we're getting the email and the password we are passing to the API. The email and the password, this is what we are getting here. So the JSON data email gives us email, JSON data password gives us the password, right? So then we basically, what we're going to do now, we want to check if that email exists in our database. So actually use it by using the filter by query, and then we'll retrieve the first item. So if it is not, we just say, oh, invalid credentials, right? So if that user actually exists, we basically just convert that user to some sort of dictionary. Then we try to get the ID from that user. So you can now basically have the password instance, right? So yeah, what we're actually doing here is to make sure that the user will basically have the password supplied matches the one assigned to the user at the point of creation, right? So that's what we're doing here. Basically, just trying to compare the hash, right? So this is what we're doing here. Check password hash. So if it is valid, we just return the success response with the access token and then the user ID. If it is not, we return some sort of 41 unauthorized, right? So it's still the same thing as valid in credentials. So but basically here it means unauthorized. So if there's any error, we just return something went wrong with the actual error. Good stuff, right? So then we'll move on to the next one. So now, first thing I will do is to copy this token. I'll copy this token here and just put it within our environment. I'm still saving in globals. For those familiar with Postman, right? So no, don't worry about that. I can come here and just put my token somewhere. Authorization, bearer token. Yes, I can specify it here. This will be available in the app level, so you can be able to use this token wherever you want. So send that. Good. You can see that I basically, when I check to get users, I'm getting this. So that means it's working as expected. So then we can basically check the get user controller, right? So then what we're actually doing is, for us to be able to get the user coming from the token, we basically have a custom function called the get WT identity. I've created this function separately, right? So, well, no, not created. It's actually coming from GWT extended, right? So if you have any token, before you call this get user controller, so I need to go to the route so you understand this properly. So yes, so this is the route for the get users. So you can see we basically have get user controller here. We have the GWT require. These are the custom functions I created. GWT require and non-revoked token. So go to GWT required. You see this it's coming from one of our decorators, GWT extended, right? It's just a way for us to know, oh, this is a token we are getting, if it's a valid token or not. So, but then I've created a custom one called non-revoked token required. So I'll give you a little background regards this. So now immediately we have lots of GWT tokens lying around. So if a user logs out, we basically set this token to revoked. So we have to blacklist this token. So we have a separate model responsible for blacklisting token. So this is the JTI. It receives the JTI, and then it's blacklisted. So when the user wants to log in with that exact JTI or JSON Web Token or access token, it would not be able to have access, right? So this is one way we keep track of token. Is one way we're actually managing our token. So basically, it has this. We wrap it. It's a middleware. The way our middleware works in Flask. So basically, have the wrap function. So we have decorated functions. We're using decorated. Just have your try except. So now what we're actually doing is we try to get GWT. Get GWT is coming from Flask GWT extended, and then we have the JTI. So it returns an object that has JTI key. So we basically have the JTI, and then we match the JTI with what we have in the blacklisted token. If it's actually there, that means that token is actually revoked. So if it is not, you can just proceed. Okay, so that's a little background as regards the non-revoked token. So if it is not, it actually returns decorated. Decorated returns the functions of the argument, like it returns the actual JTI. So we'll go through this again, and then we'll go to the user controller. So we are using this get JWT identity that's coming from Flask extended, to basically check our JTI to know the user that we're dealing with. Basically contains the user ID. So then we have the current user ID. So that's what we are getting from here. So you can use this to check the model and check, okay, check any user that basically has a user's ID, and then write the dictionary and return the resources response. Right, it's as simple as that. So that's how we basically do our get user controller. And then here we're basically logging out the user. So this basically runs off the the authentication flow. So when you're logging out the user, we get the JTI, and then we add that JTI to the blacklisted token model. And then we basically we were using session for some weird reason, but you can do this even without sessions, right? This is just a single model, right? So we basically return the success response that the user has been logged out successfully. So let's test it out to make sure we know what we're doing there, and we basically have that token, then log out. Click on the logout button. So I'm logged out. So we intend to log out again, it won't work because that token is not valid. So let's try to log out again. Token has been revoked. Impressive, right? So you can be able to use that same token to, access anything anymore within the platform, right? So because this token has been, has been revoked. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So this is very impressive, right? So it's very easy for you to go through one after the other. So the very next the part is the task. So first off, what I'm doing in this session is to basically show you how the models work, right? So let's start with that. So in the model, we have a task model. We've already covered other models. The task model. So the task basically has a user ID. So each task belongs to a specific user. So it has a title, description, priority, category, due date, right? So these are just a way we are using SQL coming to, basically check out, what does this field do? Is it a column? Is it a string? Right? Is it a text field? Right? So we basically, is it a date field? So basically checking it out, all of this stuff to make sure the input we get in basically conforms with the standard we wanted. Right? So we can actually go to our validators here. So we already know we're taking user ID, title, description, priority, category, and due date. So this is one way we are converting everything to dictionary just in case we want to use it. So you can see some cases where we have a model dot as dictionary. I think we have it in a lot of places. Just want to show you that real quick. Right, so something very good. So you can see something like user dot as dictionary, right? So this user dot as dictionary basically just calls the as dictionary here just for the task model, but if it's user model, it calls the dictionary um, for the user model, right? For a task model, if you call it task model dot dictionary, it basically just returns this for you, returns everything you need. Okay, so this is the model powering the task for now, right? So that's good stuff. So go ahead and check out our docs. So close this out. We're done with this. We're done with this. So task, right? So basically have the get a task, the create task. This is basically CRUD, right? So go through them one after the other. So this is the task. So first of all, I want to just create this task. So I can't create any task. I basically have to log in again. Yeah, remember we revoked our token. So let me try to log in again. Okay, so we have a new access token. One moment. Okay, so we have a new access token. Close this out. So I'll have to copy this token and put it in our app level so we can be able to reuse it. So ideally, you can save this in your globals or whatever. So yeah, so for now, we basically have to check all the gets. So let's go there are no tasks. Remember, we are paginating all of our APIs. So we'll come back to this later. We are more interested in creating tasks for now. So this is our task, test task, lorem sum, whatever. The categories work, the priority is medium. The due date is 2023, 12/10. So we can send. Good. Great stuff. So we remember to create our task here. Task was just successfully status code 200 with the information of our task. So go through the API, go to the routes, then the task route. Okay, so we basically, you can see from here, API is like V1 is our API version, resource name is task, right? Resource name is task, and then our main what's it called? Endpoint will be tasks, right? So this is a get request. So we are looking for the create. Okay, this is it. So we are using JWT as we explained earlier, required, and then we make sure that that token has not been revoked. So then we'll actually attach the create task controller to it. So for the create task controller, we go through this, right? So then what we're going to do in this case is it's very similar to what we did in like create user. We're using a very similar logic and all. Okay, so first of all, we get the user ID from the get JWT identity from Flask JWT extended. So when you install your packages, this will be included by default, right? So we have the JSON data we are getting, which is title, description, category, priority, and this. So first of all, we validate this form on the backend is what we are validating. So we check this against WT forms for our tax form. So we'll make sure that the user is actually supplying all of this correctly, right? So the title needs to be a string and needs to be required. Description needs to be a text area field and needs to be required. The category needs to be some sort of enum, right? It needs to be all of this, needs to be one of these categories, right? And nothing else. So normally we refer to this as enum in JavaScript, right? So it's more like an enum. So these are the categories, the choices required, and it's always required. So this priority, again, these are your choices right here, and it's required. And then the due date is a date field, right? It normally takes this format, year, month, and the day. So it's required as well. So go back to our controller, and then we are validating all of this. So if everything is successful, the task form is well validated, then we can proceed. If it is not, we just return 400 with the errors we are facing. The error can contain like some fields are missing, etc. So I'm going to test this real quick for you. So if, for example, I do not specify priority and then click send, I'm going to see a message priority, this field is required. So this is actually coming up because of what we set here in our tax form. Priority, okay, data required is what's kicking in there. So if, for example, I put in the same priority and I fail to specify maybe the high, medium, and low, I use something like XSS or CCCC. Then I decide to send again. Fail. So not a valid choice. So it needs to be one of all of these, priorities. But when I put in like I and send, good. It was able to go through successfully with, with our check. Great stuff. Great stuff. Right. So we'll go back to our create task controller. So we'll go through this and then we'll basically, if everything is successful, we'll grab all this and just put them into here. All these are not necessary. We just take this and put it here, depending. So I just have to lay it out for simplicity. So we add it to session, then we are just committing it. If you don't want to add it to session, great stuff. You can do it without, right? So when everything is all done, we just use the as dictionary attribute that we specify in our model to basically print out everything you want. So as dictionary basically prints out all of this for us. So that means when we create it, that's why we see everything here when we are done creating. So this is dictionary representation of the task model. So yeah, great stuff, right? So that's how we basically undo the create task. Similar things open if you want to update a task. First off, we'll just basically you check if that thing exists, if that task exists, and if you're the owner of that task. So yeah, so basically I have to check if it exists, and if it is, we validate your input with the form, the way we did in create task, right? So we validate this input, and then we tend to get all the inputs you basically specify in, and then if it ever is successful, we commit it. So db session.commit. So that's one way we basically get all of these updated objects to our dictionary, to be updated, right? So that's basically it for the update task controller. So for the delete task, apply the task ID. Then we'll basically check if that task exists. If it exists, we delete it. Then you will just commit that. So whatever you do with session, you basically have to perform an action first, then you commit it, right? So don't forget to always commit. If you don't commit it, it's like what you're doing has not been reflected on the DB yet, right? So the very next step for us to get all the tasks, this is the last one. Getting all the tasks basically have to do with being able to paginate our task. So this is the way we are doing it. It's very simple. First of all, get the user ID. We'll try to get the page limit and then the search page, just in case you want to search. This is in case you want to filter. You use the request args, very similar with, when you're trying to pass in your queries as well. So we'll go right here to check for our task. Then remember the order we're doing it. We're trying to order it in a sum of descending order based on the created act. So it's very similar. When you search, we'll just basically search by title, description, category, and priority. The same thing happens for when you're filtering. So you can filter by a couple of things, by category, priority, and due date. So these are just like simple ways for you to filter, and it works. In a real life application, this is the way you want to do it. You use the highlight just to make it case insensitive, right? So yeah, same thing just applies, and you are able to, we're doing some sorts of calculations here where we trying to get the total page, total elements, the total pages, right? So then we'll get our task. So this is task we'll now put in the task list. This pagination will now contain our dictionary for the pagination object. So we return a success response, and then we're good to go. So when we check this again, basically, you can see when we try to get all tasks. So this is it, right? We're trying to get all tasks. We don't have any tasks for category font, so you can uncheck that. Send again. Good. So we have lots of categories, trying to like page and then the limit. So remember, the page and limit is coming from page limit here, from our query, right? So the page 1, limit 20. So you can go here, and then we basically check in what's going on here. So you can see that we basically have like total element is 2, while the total pages is 1. The current page is like 1, then the limit is 20, right? That is what we specify within our query right here. So that's what we have here. So basically I have to task, right, which is okay. So well, let's filter this task by priority I, right? So I think it wasn't specified here. So priority I, we can include it right away. Priority then high. So saying it again, good stuff. So it returns the one with the priority high, right? So which is wonderful. So let's get anyone. I don't know if we have any category called fun. Okay, we don't. We don't. Let's look for a category. Category. Okay, we have a work category. Okay, both of them are like work category, so there's no point. So category work. So we expect 2 entries. So we send that in. So basically have the 2 entries. Work. So yes, that's basically it for today. And yes, you can play around with it. I'll be dropping a link to this code as well. So you can be able to familiarize yourself with how everything works. It's basically simple. Go through it one after the other and you can get it in no time. Thank you guys for your time. See you on the next one.